Presidents can influence markets, and markets can certainly influence presidential elections. So how are investors pricing in the 2016 race? Joining me to discuss is David Bahnsen, Chief Investment Officer and Managing Director at HighTower Advisors. We're going to start with the two frontrunners right now, because these are leading in the polls: Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. You have your marker. Who wins this?
So there's no question that, first of all, Hillary would defeat Trump, in my opinion, the polls' opinion, and so forth. It's a tricky path for Trump to actually get into a competitive place. But I would put a caveat on the idea of a President Hillary Clinton, because I think the market will have a tough time pricing in which Hillary Clinton they're going to get, the one campaigning right now, or a sort of pro-market, pro-business friendly, left of center Bill Clinton 1990s.
So there's a big question mark on Hillary's front-runner status there. Let's talk about Hillary versus Cruz, because we've seen Cruz make a huge surge in recent months. How would the market view this matchup? I
think that if I were forced to bet, I would still give Hillary the win. However, I do think that you have to put a question mark on it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that this becomes a really tricky matchup, because you don't, in all fairness, have a high favorability or likability with Senator Clinton, and you certainly don't with Senator Cruz, and that could kind of be a race to the bottom in a lot of ways.
Interesting. Yeah, we are hearing that term a lot. All right, this is an interesting matchup. Let's talk about Hillary Clinton versus Marco Rubio. Check mark for Rubio. Wow, 4 check marks for Rubio.
This is the matchup that the market would most like to see. I think that the market would believe, and it's my opinion rightfully, that Senator Rubio would prevail. You have a very business-friendly but competent, likable candidate. It wouldn't be kind of extreme and tough fights with Congress. He would have a very passable legislation. But Senator Rubio does provide a certain youthful energy and a competence and overall charisma, and he's future-oriented.
Demographic diversity.
Very much so. So this is the one I think would be easiest for markets to price in.
4 check marks. That's interesting. All right, let's talk about something that's probably a little less likely, but hey, in this election cycle, anything could happen.
Yeah, so
what about these two guys? Trump versus Bernie Sanders.
I would have no idea how the market could price this in, because the market would have no way to price in it ever getting to this point. I suppose, all things being equal, probably if these two were really the nominees, you would price in a Trump win. With Sanders, though, I think at the end of the day, first of all, I believe that Senator Clinton will prevail. The real question mark for markets is how long it takes for her to defeat him, because it exposes her as more vulnerable in the general election the longer he stays around.
So big question marks, but likely going to Trump.
Probably.
This isn't exactly a matchup, but we're going to get some of these establishment candidates in, plus Ben Carson. You've got all of these guys they're competing in the polls. You know, some of them are up in New Hampshire. They've spent a lot of time in early voting states. What does the market do about them? Well,
here's what I'm going to say here. I'm putting an R by Bush, Christie, and Kasich, because the longer they stay around, the more they're hurting Rubio. I'm putting a C by Ben Carson, because the longer he stays around, the more he's hurting Ted Cruz. What they can do by staying in the race longer is make it much harder for Rubio to win the nomination. So they add to volatility in the market. And if this thing goes all the way till July or August without a Republican nominee, it first of all probably means that it's going to be Trump or Cruz, which is bad for markets ultimately, a more polarizing election. But I would guess at least 1 or 2 of them gets out after New Hampshire, if not all of them.
Fascinating. All right. Last but not least, we're going to bring back our front runners.
Yes.
What happens if Michael Bloomberg enters this race?
If Michael Bloomberg enters the race, first of all, he is saying that he won't do it if Hillary's the nominee. But let's assume he does do it with Hillary there. It definitely hurts her, because much more of his support would be coming from her. But does that necessarily mean Trump wins the White House in this 3-way? I don't know. I like the idea of him getting in against Hillary and becoming the Ross Perot on the opposite end, because in '92, there's no question Perot drew more from Bush Senior voters than from Bill Clinton.
But he wouldn't want to do that, right? He's friends with Clinton.
I don't think he'd want to do that. I don't think he'd want to do that, but I think that these guys, a couple of them, let's call it in the billionaire class, maybe function from a different pathology.
Or a millionaire class.
There you go.
That could be an interesting election.
All
right, David Bahnsen, thank you so much for joining us. It'll be an
pleasure.
interesting couple months.
Sure will, yeah.